Hello, and welcome to Am Level Up. Today's story is an emotional journey designed to challenge your listening skills while delivering a powerful lesson on resilience. Get ready to master your U.S. accent while listening to a truly unforgettable narrative. Our story belongs to Aliza, a young woman who was thrust into the darkest side of reality at the age of 23. Imagine losing your husband suddenly, becoming a widow, and facing immediate poverty with a 3-year-old son clinging to you. That's where Aliza's struggle began. But her biggest challenge wasn't the empty wallet. It was the way the world looked at her. When you're a young widow, people don't always see your pain, they often see an opportunity. Her story is about fighting the constant threat of exploitation and the cruel whispers of society. This is a story of profound injustice, but also of incredible strength, the strength of a mother's love and a son's promise. Listen closely to every detail, focusing on the emotion and the natural flow of American English. After the story, we'll dive into our shadowing practice to help you level up your speaking. Are you ready to witness how love triumphs over darkness? Let's begin. But the hardest part of my new life was not the endless cycle of poverty. It wasn't the exhausting work, the scrubbing of floors, or the aching in my body after 12 hours of labor. No, it was the way people looked at me. The change in their eyes was terrifying. When you are a young widow, people don't see your pain, your loss, or your struggle to survive. They see something else. They see your body. They see your weakness. They see an opportunity. A young woman alone, vulnerable, and desperate. At first, these invasions were small. Our landlord, Mr. Hamid, would come by to collect the rent. He'd stand too close, leaning into the doorway. His eyes didn't look at the money in my hand. They scanned me in ways that made my skin crawl and made me shiver, even on a warm day. Aliza, he'd say, dragging out my name slowly. You are too young, too beautiful, to live alone. You need a man to take care of you, a man to protect you. His smile was never kind. It was sharp, cutting, full of hidden, disgusting meaning. One evening, when I had to tell him, trembling, that I only had half the rent money, he leaned in even closer. I could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. He whispered, his voice dark and low. There are other ways to pay, you know. Ways that don't involve money. My heart stopped completely. I felt a cold wave wash over me. I quickly slammed the door shut, locking it, and leaned my back against the wood, trembling uncontrollably. I grabbed Hamza, who was clinging to my legs, and hugged him tight. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. The walls of my own small house, which were supposed to be my sanctuary, suddenly felt completely unsafe. Like they were closing in on me. At work, it was no different. In the wealthy houses where I cleaned, some of the men would deliberately find reasons to be in the same room as me. They'd stare while I bent over to pick up a rag or scrub the tile floors. Their eyes felt heavy, like physical weights pressing down on my back. One day, the owner of a house, a man I'd cleaned for weekly, walked by and, accidentally, brushed his hand against mine. He stopped and held the contact just a moment too long. Then he smiled, a practiced, fake smile, and said, "You work so hard, Aliza. You must get lonely at night. Very lonely. Lonely." That word burned inside me like acid. Did they truly think my loneliness was an invitation? Did they imagine that being a widow automatically made me an easy target, available for their secret pleasures simply because I needed to survive? I came home late that night, my body aching from the work, but my spirit utterly crushed by the humiliation. Hamza was asleep on the floor, waiting patiently for me. I sat beside him, stroking his hair, and cried silently into the silence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask the world, is this what a widow deserves? To be seen as weak, as cheap, as merely someone's object. But I had no voice. I knew that if I spoke out, people wouldn't believe me. They would blame me. They would instantly say, Aliza must have encouraged them. Why else would men behave like that? The victim is always guilty in their eyes. The worst betrayal came from a so-called family friend. This relative visited me often after my husband's death. At first, he brought groceries and spoke kindly. I thought he was a genuine source of support. But slowly, his words changed. His visits became too frequent. One evening, he dared to say, Aliza, you are still young. You need love. I can make you happy again. I froze. His hand reached toward mine, and my chest tightened painfully. I pulled back instantly and said firmly, Please leave. He didn't look apologetic, he looked angry. Don't act innocent, he sneered. Without me, how will you survive? That night, I locked the door again and hugged Hamza tightly. His small arms wrapped around my neck, and his innocent voice asked, Mama, why are you crying? How could I ever explain to a child that his mother's world was suddenly full of shadows, threats, and betrayal? Days turned into months. The same whispers, the same cruel stares, the same unwanted offers followed me everywhere. At 23, my youth and beauty, which should have been a blessing, became a curse. A neon sign flashing, take advantage. I began covering myself even more, avoiding all eye contact, and speaking only when absolutely necessary. But it didn't stop them. Once, walking home at night, a group of young men followed me, calling out dirty jokes. I held Hamza's hand tightly, walking faster, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. That night, I realized how truly vulnerable and unsafe I was. Hamza, only 8 years old, noticed the fear. He would hold my hand protectively, whispering, Mama, don't worry. I will grow up and take care of you. The world saw me as a widow, a weak woman, an object to be exploited. Only my son saw me as a mother. Only he truly understood my silent pain. But this dark chapter was not the end, because even in the deepest struggles, a powerful light was beginning to ignite. After years of living in fear, humiliation, and endless, back-breaking work, I slowly accepted that this was my life. My body was bone, tired, but my spirit refused to die. And it refused to die because I had one compelling reason to keep moving forward. That reason was my son, Hamza. Hamza was no longer a small, innocent child. By the time he turned 12, I could see something incredibly strong in his eyes. A fierce determination that seemed far beyond his age. He had watched me suffer in silence. He had seen the landlord's dirty stares. He had heard the neighbors' cruel whispers. And he had witnessed the humiliation on the streets. Even as a child, he knew instinctively that his mother lived in a world that was fundamentally unsafe and unjust. One evening, I returned home late, utterly exhausted after cleaning three separate houses. I found Hamza waiting for me outside the door. He didn't complain about the late hour or about being hungry. He simply ran to me, hugged me tightly, and spoke with an intensity that surprised me. "Mama," he promised, "I'll never let anyone hurt you again. One day I'll become strong, and you'll never have to cry." I smiled through my tears, touched by his sincerity. But deep inside, a tired voice whispered, "How can a boy, still so young, carry such a heavy promise?" But Hamza was truly not like other children. He took that promise as his life's mission. He studied harder than anyone else in his class, poring over books late into the night. When other children were outside playing noisy games, Hamza was reading and solving problems. When they laughed and played, he was working towards his goal. His commitment often meant personal sacrifice. Sometimes he would insist on going hungry, so that I could have a full meal, claiming he wasn't hungry at all. Once, I gave him a small amount of pocket money and told him to spend it on snacks for himself. A week later, I found that he hadn't spent a single penny. Instead, he had saved every cent and used it to buy me a simple pair of new shoes, because my old ones were completely worn out and full of holes. He was only a boy, but already he was becoming the noble, protective man his father couldn't live long enough to be. Still, life relentlessly kept testing us. One afternoon, I was cleaning the marble floor in a client's house when the owner, a middle-aged man, approached and stood directly behind me. I felt his ominous shadow before I even lifted my head to look. He spoke softly, sickeningly sweet. "Aliza, why do you work so hard? If you were mine, you wouldn't need to lift a finger." Before I could react, his hand touched my shoulder. My stomach immediately twisted with a cold, visceral fear. I violently pushed his hand away and stood up straight. "Please," I said, my voice shaking but firm, "respect yourself and me." He merely smirked, completely unfazed by my rejection. "Respect?" he whispered, leaning close. "Respect doesn't fill your stomach. Think about it. I left that house shaking, with a mixture of fear and rage. My dignity once again assaulted. When I reached home, Hamza instantly noticed my tears. He didn't ask any questions, he didn't need to. He knew exactly what had happened. That night, I heard him whisper to himself in the dark, a determined, steely resolve in his voice. One day, Mama, I'll make them all regret it. That was the day I realized the profound truth of our situation. While society was actively trying to break me with cruelty and poverty, it was simultaneously shaping my son into steel. Years continued to pass. Hamza entered high school and continued to shine academically. His teachers praised him for his discipline and brilliance. One teacher, Mr. Farhan, recognized his extraordinary potential and often encouraged him. Hamza, you're not just bright, he said. You're special. You can change lives, starting with your mother's. Hamza took those words seriously. He began tutoring younger kids after school, earning small, hard-won amounts of money. Instead of spending it on clothes or toys for himself, he would quietly put the cash directly into my hand. Mama, buy something for yourself. He would insist with a proud smile. When I was too exhausted to cook after a long day, Hamza would prepare simple meals. He even taught himself to sew buttons on his own shirts, so that I wouldn't have that extra chore. In every single action, he was protecting me, lifting me up, and loving me, not just as a devoted son, but as the only man of the house. By the time he was 16, he had achieved the impossible. He had won a full scholarship to study abroad. The day we received the acceptance letter, I held it in my trembling hands, my tears of joy and relief falling onto the pristine paper. Hamza hugged me tightly and whispered a final, powerful promise. Mama, your struggle ends here. I promise you. The night before his flight, I couldn't sleep. I kept cycling through the painful memories, all the days we had gone hungry, all the insults thrown at me, the unwanted hands, and the tears I cried alone into my pillow. And now, my son was leaving to build a new life, a life forged directly from all that pain and sacrifice. In the airport, as Hamza hugged me goodbye, he spoke his final promise. Mama, you've been both mother and father to me. You never gave up. Now let me fight for you. When he left, I felt both empty from his absence and utterly full of hope. Months later, he called me from abroad. His voice was bright with joy. Mama, I got a part-time job. I'll send money home every month. And he did. For the first time in years, I didn't have to scrub floors or beg a landlord for mercy. Our home slowly transformed, filled with food and new furniture. Years went by, and Hamza graduated with honors. When he finally came home, he was tall, confident, and proud, carrying a job contract for a high-paying position. Relatives who once ignored us flocked to our house, smiling and congratulating us. But Hamza only cared about me. He hugged me tightly and whispered, Mama, we made it. Your tears are finished. At that moment, I finally understood. Society had tried to break me with poverty, abuse, and exploitation, but it had failed. Why? Because love, pure, innocent love between a mother and her son, was stronger than all of it. Hamza didn't just give me money, he gave me back my dignity. Widows are not weak, they are survivors. This powerful story gave you intense, authentic American English vocabulary and emotional rhythm. Now, it's time to truly level up your U.S. accent. We are moving into the shadowing practice segment. Listen to the story again, slower, and pause and repeat every phrase. Focus on matching my intonation and flow. Thank you for joining us on AMI Level Up. See you next time!